Money in a free society. How did money begin? To explain the role of money, we must go even further back and ask, why do men exchange at all? Exchange is the prime basis of our economic life. Without exchanges, there would be no real economy, and practically no society. Clearly, a voluntary exchange occurs because both parties expect to benefit. From Aristotle to Marx, men have mistakenly believed that an exchange records some sort of equality of value, that if 1 barrel of fish is exchanged for 10 logs, there is some sort of underlying equality between them. Actually, the exchange was made only because each party valued the two products in different order. One man's medical services for another's playing of the violin. Specialization permits each man to develop his best skill. If no one could exchange, if every man were forced to be completely self-sufficient, it is obvious that most of us would starve to death, and the rest would barely remain alive. Exchange is the life-blood, not only of our economy, but of civilization itself. Yet direct exchange of useful goods and services would barely suffice to keep an economy going above the primitive level. Such direct exchange, or barter, is hardly better than pure self-sufficiency. Why is this? For one thing, it is clear that very little production could be carried on. If Jones hires some laborers to build a house, with what will he pay them? With parts of the house, or with building materials they could not use? The two basic problems are indivisibility and lack of coincidence of wants. Thus, if Smith has a plow, which he would like to exchange for several different things, say eggs, bread, and a suit of clothes, how can he do so? How can he break up the plow and give part of it to a farmer and another part to a tailor? Even where the goods are divisible, it is generally impossible for two exchangers to find each other at the same time. If A has a supply of eggs for sale and B has a pair of shoes, how can they get together if A wants a suit? Clearly, any sort of civilized economy is impossible under direct exchange. But man discovered in the process of trial and error the route that permits a greatly expanding economy: indirect exchange. Under indirect exchange, you sell your product not for a good which you need directly, but for another good which you then in turn sell for the good you want. At first glance, this seems like a clumsy and roundabout operation, but it is actually the marvelous instrument that permits civilization to develop. Consider the case of A, the farmer, who wants to buy the shoes made by B. Since B doesn't want his eggs, he finds what B does want, let's say butter. A then exchanges his eggs for C's butter, and sells the butter to B for shoes. He first buys the butter not because he wants it directly, but because it will permit him to get his shoes. Similarly, Smith, a plow owner, will sell his plow for one commodity which he can more readily divide and sell, say butter, and will then exchange parts of the butter for eggs, bread, clothes, etc. In both cases, the superiority of butter, the reason there is extra demand for it beyond simple consumption, is its greater marketability. If one good is more marketable than another, if everyone is confident that it will be more readily sold, then it will come into greater demand, because it will be used as a medium of exchange. It will be the medium through which one specialist can exchange his product for the goods of other specialists. Now, just as in nature there is a great variety of skills and resources, so there is a variety in the marketability of goods. Some goods are more widely demanded than others. Some are more divisible into smaller units without loss of value. Some more durable over long periods of time. Some more transportable over large distances. All of these advantages make for greater marketability. It is clear that in every society the most marketable goods will be gradually selected as the media for exchange. As they are more and more selected as media, the demand for them increases because of this use, and so they become even more marketable. The result is a reinforcing spiral. More marketability causes wider use as a medium, which causes more marketability. Eventually, one or two commodities are used as general media in almost all exchanges, and these are called money. Historically, many different goods have been used as media. Through the centuries, two commodities have emerged as money in the free competition of the market, and have displaced the other commodities, gold and silver. Both are uniquely marketable, are in great demand as ornaments, and excel in the other necessary qualities. In recent times, silver, being relatively more abundant than gold, has been found more useful for smaller exchanges, while gold is more useful for larger transactions. The important thing is that whatever the reason, the free market has found gold and silver to be the most efficient monies. This process, the cumulative development of a medium of exchange on the free market, is the only way money can become established. Money cannot originate in any other way, neither by everyone suddenly deciding to create money out of useless material, nor by government calling bits of paper money. Thus, government is powerless to create money for the economy. It can only be developed by the processes of the free market. A most important truth about money now emerges from our discussion. Money is a commodity. Learning this simple lesson is one of the world's most important tasks. So often have people talked about money as something much more or less than this. Money is not an abstract unit of account, divorceable from a concrete good. It is not a useless token only good for exchanging. It is simply a commodity. It differs from other commodities in being demanded mainly as a medium of exchange. But aside from this, it is a commodity, and like all commodities, it has an existing stock. It faces demands by people to buy and hold it. Like all commodities, its price, in terms of other goods, is determined by the interaction of its total supply or stock and the total demand by people to buy and hold it. People buy money by selling their goods and services for it, just as they sell money when they buy goods and services. The emergence of money was a great boon to the human race. With money, the problems of indivisibility and coincidence of wants that plagued the barter society all vanish. Now Jones can hire laborers and pay them in money. Smith can sell his plow in exchange for units of money. The money commodity is divisible into small units, and it is generally acceptable by all. And so all goods and services are sold for money, and then money is used to buy other goods and services that people desire. Because of money, an elaborate structure of production can be formed, with land, labor services, and capital goods cooperating to advance production at each stage and receiving payment in money. The establishment of money conveys another great benefit. Since all exchanges are made in money, all the exchange ratios are expressed in money. These exchange ratios are prices, and the money commodity serves as a common denominator for all prices. And so people can now compare the market worth of each good to that of every other good. Now that we have seen how money emerged and what it does, we may ask, what is the stock or supply of money in society, and how is it exchanged? Most tangible physical goods are traded in terms of weight, and so trading takes place in terms of units like tons, pounds, ounces, grains, grams, etc. One of the cardinal virtues of gold as money is it has no differences in quality. An ounce of pure gold equals any other ounce of pure gold the world over. It is obvious that the size of the common unit chosen in trading makes no difference. One country on the metric system may prefer to figure in grams. England or America may prefer to reckon in grains or ounces. All units of weight are convertible into each other. Assuming gold is chosen as the money, the size of the gold unit used in reckoning is immaterial to us. All this might seem like laboring the obvious, except that a great deal of misery in the world would have been avoided if people had fully realized these simple truths. Nearly everyone thinks of money as abstract units for something or other, each cleaving uniquely to a certain country. American money was dollars, French was francs, German marks, etc. All these were admittedly tied to gold, but all were considered sovereign and independent, and hence it was easy for countries to go off the gold standard. The various names that units may have are simply definitions of units of weight. The British pound sterling originally signified a pound weight of silver. And what of the dollar? The dollar began as the generally applied name of an ounce weight of silver. Clearly, such exchanges and such a welter of names were confusing and misleading. In a purely free market, gold would simply be exchanged directly as grams, grains, or ounces, and such confusing names as dollars, francs, etc. would be superfluous. The free market will choose as the common unit whatever size of the money commodity is most convenient. It makes no real difference what shape any of the metal is at any time. Gold has been traded as money in the raw form of nuggets, as gold dust in sacks, and even as jewelry. It should not be surprising that gold or other monies can be traded in many forms, since their important feature is their weight. Now we may ask, how much money do we need? Must the money supply be regulated by some sort of criterion, or can it be left alone to the free market? All sorts of criteria have been put forward: that money should move in accordance with population, with the volume of trade, with the amounts of goods produced, so as to keep the price level constant, etc. Few indeed have suggested leaving the decision to the market. But money differs from other commodities in one essential fact, and grasping this difference furnishes a key to understanding monetary matters. When the supply of any other good increases, this increase confers a social benefit. More consumer goods mean a higher standard of living for the public. More capital goods mean sustained and increased living standards in the future. New fertile land or natural resources also promises to add to living standards, present and future. But what about money? Does an addition to the money supply also benefit the public at large? To explain the role of money supply, we must ask, does money have a price? Since a price is simply an exchange ratio, it clearly does. Consumer goods are used up by consumers. Capital goods and natural resources are used up in the process of producing consumer goods. But money is not used up. Its function is to act as a medium of exchanges, to enable goods and services to travel more expeditiously from one person to another. At any one time, all goods in the economy will exchange at certain prices. The price of money, then, is the purchasing power of the monetary unit, in this case of the gold ounce. It tells what that ounce can purchase in exchange. What determines the price of money? The same forces that determine all prices on the market, that venerable but eternally true law, supply and demand. We all know that if the supply of eggs increases, the price will tend to fall. If the buyer's demand for eggs increases, the price will tend to rise. The same is true for money. An increase in the supply of money will tend to lower its price. That is, the purchasing power of the money unit will fall all along the line. Conversely, if the supply of money falls, the purchasing power of the money rises. What is the effect of a change in the money supply? What would happen if, overnight, some good fairy slipped into pockets, purses, and bank vaults and doubled our supply of money? In our example, she magically doubled our supply of gold. Would we be twice as rich? Obviously not. What makes us rich is an abundance of goods, and what limits that abundance is a scarcity of resources, namely land, labor, and capital. Multiplying coin will not whisk these resources into being. We may feel twice as rich for the moment, but clearly all we are doing is diluting the money supply. As the public rushes out to spend its newfound wealth, prices will, very roughly, double, or at least rise until the demand is satisfied, and money no longer bids against itself for the existing goods. Thus we see that while an increase in the money supply, like an increase in the supply of any good, lowers its price, the change does not, unlike other goods, confer a social benefit. The public at large is not made richer. Whereas new consumer or capital goods add to standards of living, new money only raises prices, that is, dilutes its own purchasing power. The reason for this puzzle is that money is only useful for its exchange value. Other goods have various real utilities, so that an increase in their supply satisfies more consumer wants. Money has utility only for prospective exchange. Its utility lies in its purchasing power. The change does not, unlike other goods, confer a social benefit. An increase in the money supply, then, only dilutes the effectiveness of each gold ounce. On the other hand, a fall in the supply of money raises the power of each gold ounce to do its work. We come to the startling truth that it doesn't matter what the supply of money is. Any supply will do as well as any other supply. The free market will simply adjust by changing the purchasing power or effectiveness of the gold unit. There is no need to tamper with the market in order to alter the money supply that it determines. At this point, the monetary planner might object, all right, granting that it is pointless to increase the money supply, isn't gold mining a waste of resources? Shouldn't the government keep the money supply constant and prohibit new mining? The objection overlooks an important point, that gold is not only money, but is also, inevitably, a commodity. An increased supply of gold may not confer any monetary benefit, but it does confer a non-monetary benefit. That is, it does increase the supply of gold used in consumption, ornaments, dental work, and the like, and in production, industrial work. Gold mining, therefore, is not a social waste at all. We conclude, therefore, that determining the supply of money, like all other goods, is best left to the free market. No dictated quantity of money will do the work better, and the free market will set the production of gold in accordance with its relative ability to satisfy the needs of consumers, as compared with all other productive goods. The critic of monetary freedom is not so easily silenced, however. There is in particular the ancient bugbear of hoarding. The image is conjured up of the selfish old miser, hoards up gold unused in his cellar or treasure trove, thereby stopping the flow of circulation and trade, causing depressions and other problems. Is hoarding really a menace? In the first place, at what point does a man's cash balance become a faintly disreputable hoard, or the prudent man a miser? It is impossible to fix any definite criterion. Generally, the charge of hoarding means that A is keeping more cash than B thinks is appropriate for A. Economists err if they believe something is wrong when money is not in constant, active circulation. What has simply happened is an increased demand for money on the part of the miser. As a result, prices of goods fall, and the purchasing power of the gold ounce rises. There has been no loss to society, which simply carries on with a lower active supply of more powerful gold ounces. Even in the worst possible view of the matter, then, nothing has gone wrong, and monetary freedom creates no difficulties. So far, we have obtained the following picture of money in a purely free economy. Gold or silver coming to be used as a medium of exchange, circulating by weight, prices fluctuating freely on the market in response to consumer demands and supplies of productive resources. The resulting free economy would not be chaotic. On the contrary, the economy would move swiftly and efficiently to supply the wants of consumers. Thus far, we have simplified the problem by assuming only one monetary metal, gold. Suppose that two or more monies continue to circulate on the world market, say gold and silver. Would not two monies be impossibly chaotic? Silver remained in circulation precisely because it was convenient, for small change, for example. Silver and gold could easily circulate side by side, and have done so in the past. The relative supplies of and demands for the two metals will determine the exchange rate between the two, and this rate, like any other price, will continually fluctuate in response to these changing forces. The free market, in short, is eminently orderly, not only when money is free, but even when there is more than one money circulating. What kind of standard will a free money provide? The important thing is that the standard not be imposed by government decree. If left to itself, the market may establish gold as a single money, gold standard, silver as a single money, silver standard, or perhaps most likely, both as monies with freely fluctuating exchange rates, parallel standards. Suppose then that the free market has established gold as money, forgetting again about silver for the sake of simplicity. Even in the convenient shape of coins, gold is often cumbersome and awkward to carry and use directly in exchange. For larger transactions, it is awkward and expensive to transport several hundred pounds of gold. But the free market, ever ready to satisfy social needs, comes to the rescue. Gold, in the first place, must be stored somewhere. And just as specialization is most efficient in other lines of business, certain firms then will be successful on the market in providing warehousing services. As in the case of all warehouses, the owner's right to the stored goods is established by a warehouse receipt, which he receives in exchange for storing the goods. The receipt entitles the owner to claim his goods at any time he desires. This warehouse will earn profit no differently from any other, that is, by charging a price for its storage services. There is every reason to believe that gold warehouses or money warehouses will flourish on the free market in the same way that other warehouses will prosper. In fact, warehousing plays an even more important role in the case of money. For all other goods pass into consumption, and so must leave the warehouse after a while to be used up in production or consumption. But money, as we have seen, is mainly not used in the physical sense. Instead, it is used to exchange for other goods, and to lie in wait for such exchanges in the future. In short, money is not so much used up as simply transferred from one person to another. In such a situation, convenience inevitably leads to transfer of the warehouse receipt instead of the physical gold itself. Suppose, for example, that Smith and Jones both store their gold in the same warehouse. Jones sells Smith an automobile for 100 gold ounces. They could go through the expensive process of Smith's redeeming his receipt and moving their gold to Jones' office, with Jones turning right around and redepositing the gold again, but they will undoubtedly choose a far more convenient course. Smith simply gives Jones a warehouse receipt for 100 ounces of gold. In this way, warehouse receipts for money come more and more to function as money substitutes. Fewer and fewer transactions move the actual gold. In more and more cases, paper titles to the gold are used instead. As the market develops, there will be three limits on the advance of this substitution process. One is the extent that people use these money warehouses, called banks, instead of cash. Clearly, if Jones for some reason didn't like to use a bank, Smith would have to transport the actual gold. The second limit is the extent of the clientele of each bank. In other words, the more transactions taking place between clients of different banks, the more gold will have to be transported. The more exchanges are made by clients of the same bank, the less need to transport the gold. If Jones and Smith were clients of different warehouses, Smith's bank, or Smith himself, would have to transport the gold to Jones' bank. Third, the clientele must have confidence in the trustworthiness of their banks. If they suddenly find out, for example, that the bank officials have had criminal records, the bank will likely lose its business in short order. In this respect, all warehouses and all businesses resting on goodwill are alike. As banks grow and confidence in them develops, their clients may find it more convenient in many cases to waive their right to paper receipts, called bank notes, and instead to keep their titles as open book accounts. In the monetary realm, these have been called bank deposits. Instead of transferring paper receipts, the client has a book claim at the bank. He makes exchanges by writing an order to his warehouse to transfer a portion of this account to someone else. This written order is called a check. Thus, in our example, Smith will order the bank to transfer book title to his 100 gold ounces to Jones. It should be clear that economically there is no difference whatever between a bank note and a bank deposit. Both are claims to ownership of stored gold. Both are transferred similarly as money substitutes, and both have the identical 3 limits on their extent of use. The client can choose, according to his convenience, whether he wishes to keep his title in note or deposit form. Now, what has happened to their money supply as a result of all these operations? If paper notes or bank deposits are used as money substitutes, does this mean that the effective money supply in the economy has increased, even though the stock of gold has remained the same? Certainly not. For the money substitutes are simply warehouse receipts for actually deposited gold. An increase or decrease in the use of substitutes, then, exerts no change on the money supply. Only the form of the supply is changed, not the total. The total money supply has remained the same. Curiously, many people have argued that it would be impossible for banks to make money if they were to operate on this 100% reserve basis. Gold always represented by its receipt. Yet there is no real problem, any more than for any warehouse. Almost all warehouses keep all the goods for their owners, 100% reserve, as a matter of course. In fact, it would be considered fraud or theft to do otherwise. Their profits are earned from service charges to their customers. The banks can charge for their services in the same way. If it is objected that customers will not pay the high service charges, this means that the bank's services are not in very great demand, and the use of their services will fall to the levels that consumers find worthwhile. We come now to perhaps the thorniest problem facing the monetary economist, an evaluation of fractional reserve banking. We must ask the question, would fractional reserve banking be permitted in a free market, or would it be proscribed as fraud? It is well known that banks have rarely stayed on a 100% basis very long. Since money can remain in the warehouse for a long period of time, the bank is tempted to use some of the money for its own account. Tempted also because people do not ordinarily care whether the gold coins they receive back from the warehouse are the identical gold coins they deposited. The bank is tempted then to use other people's money to earn a profit for itself. If the banks lend out the gold directly, the receipts, of course, are now partially invalidated. There are now some receipts with no gold behind them. In short, the bank is effectively insolvent, since it cannot possibly meet its own obligations if called upon to do so. It cannot possibly hand over its customers' property, should they all so desire. Generally, banks, instead of taking the gold directly, print uncovered or pseudo-warehouse receipts, that is, warehouse receipts for gold that is not and cannot be there. These are then loaned at a profit. Clearly, the economic effect is the same. More warehouse receipts are printed than gold exists in the vaults. What the bank has done is to issue gold warehouse receipts which represent nothing, but are supposed to represent 100% of their face value in gold. The pseudo-receipts pour forth on the trusting market in the same way as the true receipts, and thus add to the effective money supply of the country. Issue of pseudo-receipts, like counterfeiting of coin, is an example of inflation. Inflation may be defined as any increase in the economy's supply of money not consisting of an increase in the stock of the money metal. Fractional reserve banks, therefore, are inherently inflationary institutions. Admittedly, if all the depositors presented their claims, the banks would be bankrupt, since outstanding receipts exceed gold in their vaults. But banks simply take the chance, usually justified, that not everyone will ask for his gold. Defenders of banks reply as follows. The banks are simply functioning like other businesses. They take risks. The great difference, however, between the fractional reserve bank and all other businesses is this. Other businessmen use their own or borrowed capital in ventures, and if they borrow credit, they promise to pay at a future date, taking care to have enough money at hand on that date to meet their obligation. But the bank isn't borrowing from its depositors. It doesn't pledge to pay back gold at a certain date in the future. Instead, it pledges to pay the receipt in gold at any time, on demand. In short, the banknote or deposit is not an IOU or debt. It is a warehouse receipt for other people's property. Further, when a businessman borrows or lends money, he does not add to the money supply. The loaned funds are saved funds, part of the existing money supply being transferred from saver to borrower. Bank issues, on the other hand, artificially increase the money supply, since pseudo-receipts are injected into the market. A bank, then, is not taking the usual business risk. It does not, like all businessmen, see to it that it will have enough money on due dates to pay its bills. Instead, most of its liabilities are instantaneous, but its assets are not. The bank creates new money out of thin air, and does not, like everyone else, have to acquire money by producing and selling its services. In short, the bank is already, and at all times, bankrupt, but its bankruptcy is only revealed when customers get suspicious and precipitate bank runs. No other business experiences a phenomenon like a run. No other business can be plunged into bankruptcy overnight simply because its customers decide to repossess their own property. No other business creates fictitious new money which will evaporate when truly gauged. Here we conclude that morally such banking would have no more right to exist in a truly free market than any other form of implicit theft. It is true that the note or deposit does not actually say on its face that the warehouse guarantees to keep a full backing of gold on hand at all times. But the bank does promise to redeem on demand, and so when it issues any fake receipts, it is already committing fraud, since it immediately becomes impossible for the bank to keep its pledge and redeem all of its notes and deposits. Which particular receipts are fraudulent can only be discovered after a run on the bank has occurred, since all the receipts look alike, and the late-coming claimants are left high and dry. If fraud is to be proscribed in a free society, then fractional reserve banking would have to meet the same fate. The issue of warehouse receipts for non-existent goods, identical with genuine receipts, is fraud upon those who possess claims to non-existent property. None of this discussion is meant to impugn the general practice of credit, which has an important and vital function on the free market. In a credit transaction, the possessor of money exchanges it for an IOU payable at some future date, and the interest charge reflects the higher valuation of present goods over future goods on the market. In sum, there is never any need for a larger supply of money, aside from the non-monetary uses of gold or silver. An increased supply of money can only benefit one set of people at the expense of another set. And as we have seen, that is precisely what happens when the banks inflate the money supply. There can, incidentally, never be an actual monetary shortage, since the very fact that the market has established and continues to use gold or silver as a monetary commodity shows that enough of it exists to be useful as a medium of exchange. If we favor the free market in other directions, if we wish to eliminate government invasion of person and property, we have no more important task than to explore the ways and means of a free market in money.